Welcome to Electric Evolution with Liz Allan. This podcast explores the transition to net zero and the systems driving real change in how we move, live and power our world. Every week I sit down with the people leading that change, those offering insight, innovation and impact in many ways people don't fully see until they hear their stories. If you're ready for real conversations that inspire action and drive change, please like this video, subscribe to the channel and join us on this journey. And let's cut through the noise and build a better future together. Hi everyone and welcome back to another episode of Electric Evolution. I have Tom Davies from Circontrol with me today and he's the Sales and Marketing Director. Tom, we've been having quite a few chats lately, haven't we? It's just so lovely to actually have you join me. Thank you very much.
Liz, it's an absolute pleasure to be here and thank you for having me as well.
It was funny because I always look through people's past on LinkedIn before I interview you, and we were just talking about it now. And there's one thing that I spotted that you were like, "Oh, did you get that from my CV?" And that was really, really funny. But I think some of the stuff that you've done in the past are really interesting. And I think it'd be really good to kind of explain to people what you've done before the role you're in now, especially like early doors, you know, and what got you into what you know working at Circontrol. Give us a little bit of a summary.
Okay, sounds good, Liz. So I think maybe you're probably referencing something that I did what's now about 13 years ago. So in between my first and second year of uni, I volunteered for an organisation called Thrive Africa. So I was out in Ghana in West Africa for a whole month, which was fantastic fun, superb experience, and something that I was at the time and still am very thankful to have been able to go and do. And it was quite a unique experience, really, because I kind of got involved because they'd come to the university and sort of said what they were about, and they were looking for volunteers for that summer. And it was all kind of focused on sort of building and developing libraries for orphanages and for schools in Ghana, as well as creating things like benches and chairs. And whilst I'm not a carpenter, it was something that I could get involved with on the painting front, but kind of reading and people finding their passion for that kind of thing is certainly something that's always been central to what I've been interested in. So that was what kind of sparked my interest. And I think that kind of way in for me into an activity or organisation is also what's led me to where I am today. I think having been at university, I always wanted to go and do a graduate scheme because that would give me the opportunity to try a number of different roles in different departments with different teams to see what I was interested in. And I worked at an infrastructure services organisation called AMEY, fairly well known, and that was great. I worked on a distressed highways project. I worked on the Docklands Light Railway, and then I worked in the investments team, which had a quite wide-ranging set of facets to it. But the bit that I was involved in was the projects team, which was ultimately focused on looking at new infrastructure to invest in. So things like fibre to the premises, energy from waste were key things that were investigated and worked upon. But the one that kind of caught my interest that I was then involved with in far more depth was EV charging, because it was kind of emerging as hang on a minute, there might be a bit of an investment case here for some charging. So that was what kind of got me into EV. But it was that kind of founding point around development, growth, the kind of almost futuristic-y nature of it that was certainly what interested me. And it was always felt, particularly in those days, so around kind of 2018 to 2021, which feels like yesterday, but was obviously only still 5, 6, 7 years ago. It felt very, very dynamic and still does. And I think we're all aware of some of the challenges that we've all faced in the industry over the last year, 18 months or so. But particularly then, and even so more so now, I think it's still a dynamic place for fairly innovative people.
Yes, very, very true. So you moved from Amy. Do you want to give a little bit of info about where you kind of moved to and what you did? Because you've kind of done a number of different things, but I think you've got your zone of genius now, haven't you, as we call it?
I think yes. So after Amy, I worked moved straight into Swarco, or as now branded eVolt Charging. And I worked in the sales and development team. So I was working with a whole range of customers immediately around local authorities, CPOs, workplace charging, all of that side of the industry. And that was at the time that Evolt, and as they were then sort of branded predominantly Swarco Smart Charging, were really beginning to accelerate and find the kind of growth pace that they always kind of wanted to. And it was a super exciting time to be in that organisation. And it was, a kind of a bit of a cross-section of timing and me being in the area that I seem to be kind of most comfortable at. So as the business expanded, picked up a role as head of key account management, which enabled me to not just get my first kind of taste of leadership, but also be in a position whereby I was able to truly shape a kind of small area of strategy for a business. So it was all, able for me to not just build that team, but be in a position to understand what the customers' main gripes were, understand what kept them up at night, understand what their future kind of goals and ambitions are. And it was that kind of left me in the space around development that I was most passionate and interested with. Again, at the time, there was a big growth desire at Swarco to build out the CPO side of things, Pogo Charge. Again, fairly well recognised name over the last couple of years in the CPO space. And it was at Pogo Charge where I worked with the management team to really grow and accelerate from what was at the time a small number of chargers, small number of deals, into something that was pulling out hundreds of chargers, met across many deals, whether they be roadside retail, hospitality, organisations as well. And I think, again, as part of the industry fluctuations that we've seen, that role and that part of the business then became to look quite different. So I stepped back into Evolt coming up for a year ago, about May 2025, and worked with a really good group there as well, effectively in a sales director role. It was titled BD director because I still had some Pogo work in the background, but ultimately it was around reshaping and resetting the sales piece in that business. So I was working there for 6 months, but then throughout that time as well, it sort of came to the fore that an organisation that I'd worked with for a long time and that had a lot of time for and a real closeness to the team there in Circontrol were looking to develop out in a whole different way. So Circontrol have worked just with Evolt charging in the UK for about the last 15 years, maybe coming up 16, I think, halfway through this year. The team there had kind of wanted to start addressing the UK market individually, so looking at ICPs, installers, CPOs, turnkey players on their own, and so they were in a position to go and sort of forge those direct relationships, look at building out an entirely different approach in the UK.
Do you want to just explain so what Circontrol actually do, just so that in case people don't know?
No, good idea, Liz. So Circontrol, Spanish, Barcelona-based EV charging hardware manufacturers, part of the Circontrol group, who have focused on many different things in the past, such as energy efficiency hardware, battery storage, and renewables. And it was through Evolt that Circontrol were able to get their charging hardware into the UK market, whereas they took a far more kind of diverse approach through Europe when it was looking at different organisations, particularly around the service piece as well. So in the UK, whilst that had worked really, really well, I think the approach from turnkeys has definitely been to move towards being agnostic. Again, personally, I get it. I've lived it in that kind of organisation. So I think that Circontrol looking to also be sort of customer and partner agnostic and flexible in the UK was a really, really good move for them to do. I think overall, the business that Circontrol have developed has been widespread in Europe and the UK because of the diversity of products. Everything from home charging, which has probably not been so much of a position in the UK for them, but all the way up to ultra rapid charging as well, and being part of CPO and bus and e-truck developments too.
Because I'm just going back to what you just said there, the way that Circontrol was coming into the UK, in some ways, maybe at that time scale was a good thing for them to go through one main customer, but actually, as you kind of move forward in time, it's sort of depending on how both companies want to move forwards, what speed they want to move and how they want to move forwards, you have to kind of review the strategy on it, don't you, really, as a hardware manufacturer, definitely.
100%, Liz. I think I'd be really interested if any of your listeners have got a different take or comment on this. But I think particularly in those earlier days, so mid 2010s towards the kind of 2021 period, it felt like eVault and Swarco were the earliest mover and probably the primary turnkey provider, looking at hardware, software, project management and installation and service and contact centre pieces as well. As time's gone on, that space has become a little bit more diverse. ICPs have moved into a lot of that. Another couple of turnkey providers have emerged that focus on different things depending on which bits are in-house. So when there's one early mover, really great strategic decision for Circontrol to be involved with that one player. Now the partnerships have opened up for everybody in that space, which I think ultimately will prove not just a better way for turnkey operators and hardware manufacturers to work, but also to ultimately find a better diverse base when it comes to taking the CPO side of things, for example, and the local authority piece. There's not just one kind of charging hardware player. There's there's kind of a multitude of organisations that are able to work with those players, such as CPOs and local authorities, to create the right mix. So whether it's AC for local authority car parks or workplaces associated with local authority organisations, or whether it is high traffic flow areas such as motorway service areas or retail parks, that's one hardware player can be partnered with organisations to cover both of those, and so can a different hardware partner. So you get to see quite a diverse set of products and services through those two customer bases.
And I was going to say, it also goes back to, when you were saying about the number of organisations are expanding and things move, it's also about taking those lessons learned from the 2010s, isn't it? Like you say, the kind of the number of organisations that were involved were quite low, as to start off with, but you take that, you grow, people are saying, oh, well, that worked but that didn't, so let's tweak this, let's do that, blah blah blah, so actually it's gradually turning into something that at first I always think it was a bit like you don't know what you don't know, and then you start learning, and then you do know what you know, and then you need to learn from what you know and then build on it. It's kind of like that, isn't it, really?
I think a really good example of exactly what you're saying there, Liz, with the learning, the trialling, the erroring and finding the right approach, is the hardware manufacturers kind of tie-ins with CPOs. So from my Pogo experience, and my role there was entirely around developing the team to approach landlords and do deals in the way that all of our CPO colleagues do at the moment in the industry. And that's around, you've got your idea of what hardware and what type of kilowatt hour output you want to put into different places, but you've also got a customer need and a partner need. Even though you're providing the rent or a payment or a service fee or whatever, there's still going to be a bit of a need. So great examples being, you might find local authority sites that will be under public ownership that you'd like to work with, but as part of the deal, they're going to want something a little bit different in terms of the AC piece. So you've got to kind of meet and play there and find out what works. Not quite so much of an investment case on the AC front, so then that probably doesn't develop so much. But then you end up with an area like hotels, and hotels want to make sure that they're staying with their competitors, so they're not falling down the league tables because they haven't got charging. So again, there's a great tick there. There's the natural ESG elements as well that they want to achieve from a corporate angle, but also this is the bit where the AC and DC hardware solution mixes work really, really well. So you want to put in DC charging hardware, and you want to put in one particular type. The hotel will likely say, well, okay, that works for us, that's great, but have you got any other different types of hardware that you work with? Because we were looking for something that might be slightly less industrial, more aesthetically pleasing, or we don't want to give you so much space. Similar issue that you get with retailers as well. Have you got an all-in-one rather than the backed-off power modules? We're willing to, look at something around the aesthetics there as well. But also the AC piece then works for overnight guests. So you end up with people using those as an overnight guest piece, and you've then got people that will come and use the DC and ultra rapid charging, and use the services, whether it be a gym, a cafe, restaurant on site as well. And to your point that you made there, Liz, you've got a way that you want to do things, they've got a way that they want to do things, and it's a way of finding the right mix that works with investment, with the type of hardware, and what is ultimately what's right for the customers as well.
Exactly, and I've just written down. It's kind of a lot of this is to do with right place, right speed as well, isn't it? You know, because like earlier charging, you'll find that there are, say for example, supermarkets have got a certain speed. I'm not saying this is all the time. Or I've been when I first started charging, kind of after I got the EV 3 years ago. I remember going to a hotel and trying to decide, do I go on the slower charger and leave it there? I think it was a 22 kilowatt. It was up in Nuneaton. Or do I go on the 50 because that's kind of what they had? And then, but I might have to get up partway through my dinner, at the hotel. So it's kind of, again, like I say, especially for hotels, if you can leave it on overnight and not have to move the car, because that's the other thing, isn't it? It's kind of the whole knowing that you've got to move your car afterwards because you don't want to be taking up a parking space that somebody else could use, so it's that kind of etiquette and courtesy. So there's all of those little factors in there. So it's it's kind of what the customer, what your customer wants, but what the end driver wants anyway. It's that part of that. It's all a part of that customer experience, isn't it?
I think that's a really good summary in terms of another major challenge around these kind of sites, particularly hotels and hospitality, that hardware manufacturers and CPOs kind of have to come together a little bit to try and solve. And there's also always going to be software and stuff as well. And I think we've mentioned it before. A bit around the hardware is it touches everyone. The driver, the grid, the CPO, the landlord, the software. It's part of everyone's journey there. But in terms of what CPOs and manufacturers need to solve together, there then needs to be a way that you've got the hardware that works in the way that you want it to, but also that's got the ability to be able to help with penalties, PCNs. None of us want to be talking about that, but unfortunately there will be instances of bay blocking, and I can give my best stern look to a driver that's outstayed their need or time there, Liz, but you do need every now and again a little bit of enforcement. So it's around, okay, does the hardware, how can the hardware help support that? Well, if you've got a screen, then you might be able to do some more push messaging, or say, look, we noticed that you've filled the battery now and you've livened the unit. You've got 10 minutes to now just move to a space elsewhere. Whose hardware can do that? And then CPOs will have to kind of come to the party a little bit and say, well, we will happily give grace periods, but that will affect the rental side of things. And so it's a really truly partnership based way of doing things around hardware and CPO deployments in a way that I'm sure there's that example wherever you go, but it's definitely not an industry where there's one bulldozing partner that's able to do absolutely everything all the time, exactly how everyone needs it to be done. And
really, you're just highlighting the fact that there are so many different moving parts. In kind of like the charging kind of optics, as it were. If you look at it holistically, you're kind of looking down and kind of going, right, well, they do that. I mean, even as a manufacturer, you're kind of, yours is the hardware, but actually you've also got your payment system, you've got your back office, you've got your kind of firmware. There's so many other things, aren't there? There's probably loads of stuff. And you've got your roaming sims and things like that. So you've got your telecom, so you've got to be able to connect it, but it's also got to be able to connect to payment and all of these, and they all need to be working, don't they? And sometimes you probably get it in the neck, because we started a conversation ages ago about this, didn't we? You probably get it in the neck as a hardware provider when it's not necessarily your problem. It's not your fault, I hate saying the word fault. I hate that word, but do you know what I mean?
I absolutely do, Liz. I think the one word that you mentioned in there that jumped out was firmware, actually, because I think that is that's a big part of obviously our hardware side of things. I absolutely think that the hardware manufacturers have got to be as involved as possible, and that's another reason why we want to be in this position of having direct relationships, not just working through one or even just a couple of partners as well. And that's because the best solutions often involve the turnkey operator, the hardware manufacturer, and the CPO ultimately, or involvement with software. Dealing with some issues recently where it took some understanding between at least 3/4 parties, when actually it then became a case of, well, okay, we've got a minor hardware fault when it comes to payment terminals, and okay, but that can be assisted by a firmware upgrade from the hardware manufacturer, and then, well, actually we've then got the service-based turnkey operator that's able to actually go and do the unlocking here and roll that out via the servicing of the hardware, but also you need the payment terminal or payment partners consent to make sure you've got the right mix on the hardware, and it isn't instant. I think that's probably one of the big gripes. I think we've made leaps and bounds in the industry with hardware and remote monitoring and servicing, whereby you can do a lot of fault detection and resolution now remotely, but with instances like the one I've just mentioned, it does need parties to come together, which can take time, but will ultimately provide better services for CPOs and for ultimately drivers. Because if drivers don't have the confidence, I mean, it's every day in the industry. I see it on the podcast a lot, Liz. You know, it's that what's right for the customer. How do we get people to believe and uptake when it comes to the EVs? And I think that reliability is often mentioned as key, and it absolutely is. You want to turn up to a charger and it be available for you to use. But I think people also need to be confident that when there is a problem, it's going to get sorted as well, and that the right partners are in the mix to be able to do that.
And within a good time scale, either you know that somebody's going to be at the end of the phone, you know, to actually answer your question, or at least you can be directed to another charger, and or you know, that charger that you're trying to work on can be reset, or, you know, like I say, there's got to be multiple options for people to be supported, hasn't there? You know, like I say, because I said to you when we spoke originally, I think, you know, back in the 90s, I worked on an end-to-end operation system. You know, I was the one kind of at the other end of the phone, dealing with the customers, and also dealing with the technicians and the engineers and sending them out. And it is about that kind of that end-to-end service, so that actually you can provide something that will work. And a lot of the from my point of view, and I've seen this internally with kind of different charging networks and stuff, but they're not always auto-updated, you know, and that's always and sometimes that comes from the back office or whatever, you know. If you've got we're in 2026 now, and if you've not got auto updates, what's going on? Do you know what I mean? It shouldn't have to manually handshake every 3 or 4 hours. Maybe I'm getting technical while I'm saying about this, but you know, there are certain things where you need to know that is working just like that for that.
And it's the confidence piece.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, isn't it? And I think the bit as well for me here, you know, we're in 2026. The age of AI is not just coming; it's here. And in case some bits have already happened and there's development beyond that, we all are using it. There's ways it's going to change our industry. And one thing that I'm actually quite pleased of in terms of the UK EV charging space, and that we all kind of live and breathe with every day, is that we haven't forgot the human touch. So, you know, if you're at a charger. Again, you know, I've had this, you know, sort of put to me many times. You know, I'm at a charger. It's raining. I've got the family in the car, and it's really late on a Sunday, and we need to get home, and all these usual scenarios. And I don't want to download an app. I want to be able to pay contactless. And yeah, I think we've moved in industry wise in that direction, absolutely. But the bit there as well is, if you want something solved, you don't want to scan a QR code and get an AI chatbot. You want to be able to ring someone, and I think that we've absolutely. Not to sort of name and shame other industries, but I definitely feel every now and again a fault happens, whether it's your Wi-Fi or your car, or you want to call your bank, and we seem to have gone backwards in that way in terms of being able to get hold of people, to have the human touch around problem solving in a way that we haven't in the industry. And that goes back to, again, why we want to be direct here as Circontrol in the UK, because we want to be able to work with organisations who can bring us in, and it's me in the UK, and it's a team that hopefully I go on and build, not just Circontrol is seen as this distant brand that they only hear about through other people. We live, we breathe, we're here to help as well.
Nice. It's true. You just got me thinking then, and it was bizarre. It was a bizarre situation that you just brought to my mind. Yesterday, I popped into Sainsbury's, which is kind of it's not even in Reading. I went to the osteopath. I'm sorry, this is TMI, everybody. Too much information. But on the way back,
that story's good, Liz. Don't worry.
I'll just pop into Sainsbury's to get a couple of things. And what you've just said there about people and where we don't want to talk to a chatbot or whatever. There was a woman there, and she wasn't that old. I'm saying this is comparison to me. She wasn't much older than me, and I'm old. But anyway, and she actually said it's really nice to have, because I did the same as her. I went, there was a load of self-service checkouts and stuff like that, but a very small number of checkouts with people on them. Somebody at the other end. And she actually made a comment. She went, "It's really nice to actually have somebody who is there to work with me while I'm doing my shopping." And like you say, we still do need that personal touch. It's not like, when you go to a charger, it's not like going to a petrol station, and where a petrol station is manned. Woman as well. It says manned, woman, whatever. Anyway, so somebody's going to be in the kiosk or whatever most of the time, unless you rock up in the middle of the night or whatever. Whereas charging isn't like that, but you do have that opportunity to, as long as the information is on the charger and it's easy to understand that if you've got a fault, ring this number and there'll be somebody there. That's part of the charging regs anyway. That's what you want, isn't it? We still want that human interaction, because that's how we can understand what the problems are and get to the root if there is something that's more kind of more tricky to solve.
And it's across the piece, so it's absolutely there in terms of the driver customer bit that you're exactly linking there to the example with the Sainsbury's and the checkout staff and Sainsbury's staff still being on the checkouts. It's the same in terms of feedback on our hardware as well. We get. I've only been in the role coming up for about 8 weeks shortly, but at the same time, when I've been reaching out to people and sort of re-engaging around the marketplace, some of the feedback has been around, well, actually, I think that this could be better, or we like that you do this, and that listening piece, and then saying, okay, let me take that away, and then responding with, well, look, we can't actually solve this bit just yet, but again, back to firmware might be able to get us there in the future, or have we looked at doing something else? This is what we can do to improve it. I think that piece to make sure people are listened to and that customers are understood around what's keeping them up at night is so key, because none of us, until we ask, are really sure what the key driving force is. So for somebody it's going to be, well, I've got a particularly bespoke boutique shop. This was a CPO example that I had, by the way. I've got a particularly boutique shop that we quite enjoy our curb appeal, and it's our kind of immediate brand, and our signage has got some fancy writing. It's this kind of for us, it's all about the image of the charge. Even if it's reliability great, customer piece great, but for us it needs to fit with the aesthetic. It needs to be elegant. It needs to be refined, and you're like, okay, well, let's look at what we can do there. And for someone else, it's, well, I want to make sure that the screen is always live. It's never on standby, and that there's always something there, because I feel like that customers need to feel that the place is alive. I don't want people to arrive at our location and there be a dark screen, and it's middle of winter and it's dark and people aren't getting the most warm feelings for being here, and then you think, well, okay, that's actually quite different to what I had last time I spoke to somebody. But the different drivers for each of our customers are, on the hardware front, can be really, really interesting, and that's led at Circontrol to us being quite R&D and innovation led. It's an engineering led business. That the highest proportion of one kind of sector of people in Circontrol is not sales, it's not marketing, it is engineering, and the R&D and laboratory side of it is part of that. And I think we've done a really good job of developing products over the years to kind of meeting where we need to be, whether it be moving into an all-in-one structure like we've kind of most recently done, developing the screen like we have with our Sonic units, but also having in the early days a charger which simply meets regulation and is a ESG win for local authorities. That was a big part of what we started as in the UK. And when you think about that, the kind of build-up that we've had in working with eVolt and developing, a kind of footprint of about 11,000 chargers at the moment in the UK, that's a really good story for our development and our widespread product suite. But it also brings challenges with it as well, because, and again, I think you and I have spoken about this as well, Liz, in your experience around using hardware throughout the UK and abroad. If someone sort of goes to charge at a charger which is quite a bit older, it's still being serviced and still works, the user experience is not as positive as it might otherwise be with one of the newer refreshed units. So, you can end up having a brand association which is actually quite historic, quite negative. It feels like yesterday's unit, whereas actually it's just part of, as we see it, a really, really solid base of products that we've had and have still got. But actually, there's a whole different raft of things up at the newer end as well. So it's about managing that legacy piece whilst also being in a position to take advantage of newer products and newer desires in the industry.
I'm just thinking, what I was saying earlier about kind of there being so many moving parts. And I kind of said to you before, didn't I, that I've had thoughts about kind of the different, we just said, the different chargers and the different hardware. When would a manufacturer get involved in a situation that wasn't necessarily led by them? So for example, if you've got older units like you're just saying, and maybe there's a bit of kind of sentiment that's coming up that says, that through the charging network that says these are problematic.
Mm-hmm.
How do you as an organisation now moving forwards intend to make that differentiator? Because you're now moving away from just the one, company that you're coming into. So you're going to get feedback from various places. But like I said to you, there's so many moving parts. You don't want to be the one that gets the finger pointed at you by saying it's your unit when there are those moving parts. But at what point, how do you make sure that you're talking on a regular basis to the charging network or whoever, because if they're using their own back office, if they're using their own payment terminal provider, etc., you're not in control of all of that stuff, are you? How do you do this to actually make sure, because this is your reputation as well as theirs, isn't it?
So this is a huge point, Liz, for me. I'm sure it is for other hardware manufacturers as well. There's also the flip side of the fault piece here, and there's the positive bit as well. So I'll start with that bit, because I think that's a good place to commence here, because you might perform fixes or provide additional hardware or services which solve some of these problems that occur, and because the work has only ever really been done through one local partner, you end up then in a position whereby you're not quite sure whether that's been the right fix, because you haven't got the end customer's view. Your one partner in the UK will probably give you some limited feedback, but actually you want to know what the impact has been. Okay, if you're a fleet provider, Did that increase your uptime again? Did that help you meet your scheduling again? Those aren't the kind of questions you can ask unless you have a direct local relationship with these players. And that's the one thing that we're looking to achieve and do now by launching this directly in the UK. Lots of the organisations that we want to work with, particularly again CPO side of things, and I think the fleet's a good example here. They've got their turnkey partners that they want to work with. And that's great because those turnkey providers will work agnostically with us and other hardware manufacturers. But what I'd also like to be in a position to do, again, it'd be really interested to hear what some of your listeners think about this, because some people only want one point of contact. Some want to be able to explore different avenues, and I've experienced both so far. But I want to be in a position whereby those relationships can be direct, even if the commercial one isn't. So I want to be able to pick up the phone and go, Tom, actually, we're seeing this kind of fault on this batch of units, or we are seeing this kind of unusually high uptime where we didn't expect it to be because we are expecting there to be an issue. Can I feed that back into you? What can you help with? And then that might need to bring in the turnkey provider or whoever you've worked with as well. But I still want there to be that direct relationship for us to be able to improve quicker and better and solve problems quicker and get it right first time. That's also a big thing. But I also fall back to my point previously. Whilst I want those one-to-one direct relationships, I'm absolutely subscribed to the partnership model of how we progress in this industry. So no one can go and do that individually, and the industry hasn't grown in that way either. So I think that's a really good way that we can hopefully relieve pressure on those one or two partners that we've already got, but have those direct relationships, but also be able to solve things and maybe even win as a kind of triumvirate as well.
And I was going to say, because that actually helps you to influence what the driver experiences anyway, isn't it? So, if you're making sure, it's a bit like a jigsaw puzzle where you've got to put all the pieces in place, but the driver's also part of that, aren't they? So you as an organisation are helping to kind of move that as a, you're knowledgeable yourself, with your background, but also, Circontrol have been around for a number of years, and it's about filling those puzzle pieces together so that there is that level of trust being built in the sector, so that drivers do know that when they plug in, they're going to get it's going to work first time, that kind of stuff. You're doing that.
I think, Liz, as well, that another big piece of the jigsaw that we haven't touched on much yet is the service side. So the bit that's detached from us is the kind of contact centre piece that you'll see use of for drivers, but the other bit is the physical response and maintenance pieces around chargers. It's absolutely existentially critical. I'd say it's that significant for hardware manufacturers to have the right partnerships around service, because, like you say, you sell that hardware in, and then if it undergoes the kind of service that you're not happy with, it can lead to really negative experiences. I'm not saying that's our experience, but those are key risks around operating in a kind of devolved way in terms of selling. When you go into customers and you want to make sure that you're bringing the right service partners in as well, performance there is absolutely key to hardware manufacturers' success, reliability and reputations. And that's another reason I want these direct relationships in the UK, because if that isn't working, then we need to know as well. And we need to find avenues to do that. I know that isn't the most uplifting and positive side of what we're talking about today, but I think it's something that we all should be critically aware of around performance and reliability in the partnerships string and chain, if you like.
But what you're saying there is mitigation, isn't it? It's a good thing to actually be able to look and
Absolutely.
Put these things in place to make sure that you've covered all your bases and you've mitigated as much as you possibly can, because that's all you can do, and just make sure that everything's in place, like you say, for the service, and that there's preventative maintenance that's being carried out as not like on a irregular thing. It's got to be managed and monitored and all of that kind of wonderful stuff as well, hasn't it?
And we've got some great partnerships around that. We really do, and I think that's something that we should all be extremely aware of as ultimately the hardware diversifiers. We've seen, as well as ourselves, if you look at those that have entered the UK from Europe as well, and that's continuing to grow. We're going to see more from all parts of the world, and that's great. The diversity of the hardware function is going to make everybody better, and ultimately lead to a fairly diverse, robust product set and partnership space for everyone in the UK. And it's important for everyone to have the right service partnerships. I think it's a big part of how we unlock a better and even more reliable hardware future than we've experienced.
So, just thinking about where Circontrol comes from in the first place, and you've got, a decent international footprint anyway, haven't you? Are there things that the UK market can learn from other countries with regards to kind of, the strategy or maturity, kind of moving forwards, do you think?
My experience, Liz, has been predominantly in the UK. So I have to say, on the ground, it's not been quite so varied outside of the UK. Obviously, I'm immersing myself in the culture of an organisation now, which barring me is entirely outside of the UK based, predominantly obviously Iberia and in particular Spain, but also large presence in the Middle East, and I think you get your cultural local differences wherever you're going to go. That's natural. I think the one or two pieces that I've started to sort of pick up over the last few weeks and months have been particularly around the partnerships between CPOs and hardware providers and what that means in the different localities. So, for example, from what I've learned from my colleagues in Circontrol that operate in France, it's the France, geographically very different to the UK, much larger, much longer road networks. You're going to see longer distances between chargers, but you're going to see more developed hubs. And those developed hubs have then grown into better locations for stopping. So even in the UK, we're still probably quite grid constrained around a lot of that. I think it's fair to say, of course, challenges that we all face. So you're trying to jump onto sites in the UK that are already developed, like motorway service stations, whereas I get the impression and the view that in other parts of Europe, that's actually driving a growth in a way it's not in the UK in terms of a destination being built around charging. I know some CPOs in the UK have done fantastic jobs at creating a charging and a location in one. That's brilliant to see. You've then got a situation whereby I'd love in the UK to see our chargers be a part of driving the growth of an area based on the charging being the first pull. I think that'd be quite an interesting thing to see develop.
I was going to say that I suppose that in itself depends on the footfall around that area as well, doesn't it? So that's kind of geospatial information that you've got to look at with kind of, well, I suppose you've got a number of things, haven't you? You've got what grid capacity is there, but what's also that footfall, I can't even speak, footfall. I suppose it's funny because I was just thinking, so Michelle Little, who works with me at Full Circle and ChargeWise, our other business, she's up in Amble in Northumberland, and at the moment, and I'm going to chuck this one in, Michelle. She is currently crowdfunding for to create, because her passion besides all of this stuff is kind of she likes the spooky things. She was on a podcast at Christmas, and she's up in, like I say, Amble, which is on the coast in Northumberland, and she's crowdfunding for this to create a haunted museum. And just think about what you said, it would be interesting because what will happen in Amble as she builds this is the footfall theoretically should increase. So therefore you'll be able to see as a charging as a charging manufacturer, if you're looking at geospatial information, you'll see those numbers coming through and actually increasing. So it'd be interesting when you see like coastal towns or places like that maybe normally might not be of interest to a charging network? Not, I know you're not, as in you're a manufacturer.
Indeed, yeah.
But you know what I mean? It's kind of like, as these things move, it would be good to kind of be able to see how you can kind of go, right, okay, Amble's looking like it's getting lots more visitors than it would do normally. Let's have a look at it like that. Do you see that as kind of part of the ability to future-proof as well?
So I think to answer that question of future-proofing and look at where we're going with that kind of site, I think we need to look at where we've been in the industry. So if you think about the last couple of years, particularly, my experience in the CPO side of things is really prevalent here. I think we've kind of seen that land grab bit. We're now seeing organisations look at, okay, we don't necessarily need loads more sites. What we do want to do is build out on the sites that we're doing really well on, or refresh the infrastructure at those sites to make them as good as they can be. And at the moment, I think that utilisation piece will improve as more EVs are purchased and they hit the roads. I think people using CPO spaces because they have to. I definitely think that the can't charge at home piece is always going to be there. That's what, like the 5 to 10%, if that, of the driver base. That's me. I've driven an EV for 5+ years now, and I've never been able to charge at home. I've relied entirely on the CPO network. So there's always going to be that style of driver. But as more drivers are able to take on EVs, more still will be able to charge at home. That's still going to drive the necessity of people that drive around the country that want to charge on CPO spaces. And that leads me into, what do we then think in the future of the kind of sites that you've just mentioned, Liz? I think it's then at a point where we're then at the utilisation levels and we go, well, actually, now we think, because people do need to charge. Great example there, your colleague Michelle's sort of Go Spirits Museum or Ghosts Museum.
The Haunted Museum in Amble, yes, Northumberland Haunted Museum, yeah.
So that is a good example of, if I was still in my role as a CPO BD director, I'd probably look at and go, that's probably not one that we're going to look to go at now. However, as time then has gone on, that then becomes a location where, well, okay, people are going to be coming here in the school holidays, they're going to be driving a long way. They want to take the pressure off and just have an AC charge for the 2 hours that they're here, or a small DC charge as well. So that kind of site comes more into play as time goes on. And I think it'll be really interesting to see, linking to the point I made just previously around, will we then start to see that the land purchase, we build the hub, build it, and they will come, and then after we've got the chargers, there'll be other things that we can bring in the way that might have happened in other parts of Europe. I think there's still many like Tesla hubs, for example, which are always often near a Tesla showroom. They're on a motorway service location where you'll obviously a lot of the other key CPOs that operate in those spaces. But there are still some, and I think one might actually be out your way in kind of Berkshire way, where it's pretty remote.
Yeah, I know which one you mean. I've not been to it, but I've heard about it. Yeah.
So there you go. There are still those that might well precipitate the growth of something else in that space as well. And all the while, we absolutely want to be there, supporting all these different organisations and having the relationships with them, because we're able to support with CPOs, with the large scale ultra rapid infrastructure. We're able to operate home chargers. We're able to work with people looking to bring in and operate a home charger. And the sweet spot for us, continues to be quite often the local authority and the lower DC grade in terms of the product manufacture and sort of turnover of products in that way.
So I'm going to ask you one final question here.
Go for it.
What excites you about the future? You've not been in the role for too long, but what excites you about the future of what you can bring, from your previous experience and the way things are moving, about working in the sector and the business? What's kind of the exciting bits that you can kind of summarise?
The bit for me, Liz, I've been, since moving into the Circontrol Evolt fold in 2021, sort of found what professionally I'm most passionate about, and that was growth and growing businesses and teams. and that's what's given me the most satisfaction personally in my roles, which was what attracted me to Circontrol when they said, we want to grow in the UK, we want you to come and lead and launch it and grow it and build it from here. So that was sort of on a base number one. It was just the kind of thing that I was looking to go and do next. That, I've described to a few people, it feels like I'm sort of launching and running a startup, but with the backing of a great multinational organisation. So it's got that kind of excitement and removes that kind of jeopardy around the CPO bit. But Circontrol specific, the bit that excites me the most is this year we're looking at kind of re-establishing these relationships and focusing on our charging hardware beyond 2026 and into 2027 and beyond. We don't just want to be seen as someone that sells charging hardware. We want to be a renewables technology partner. So we don't just want to be selling pieces of kit or be seen to be doing that. We want to be bringing in the capability that we've got in Spain, particularly around BESS, so the battery storage piece and the solar piece, and turning that into a proper renewables tie-up with our charging hardware as a base. And it's that strategic direction of the business and the capability for me to grow that piece here, which is what truly excites me about my role and what we can do as an organisation. And from the early conversations that I've been having, it's been particularly around that battery piece that people are suddenly coming and saying, well, actually, we think there might be something that we can look at there. And having that conversation today might yield something that gets delivered in 18 months' time. So having that ability to grow and build that piece out is absolutely where the excitement stems from for me.
Well, I look forward to seeing this and, seeing it grow and seeing it kind of change into something that, that this is your baby, isn't it, really? So over here it is anyway.
Yeah,
but
hopefully so, Liz.
And I really look forward to that. And hopefully we'll kind of get to meet one of the events in future and catch up properly. But look, it's been lovely to talk to you, Tom. You've got a lot of energy and enthusiasm, and I'm really looking forward to kind of seeing things move forward. With
Thank
you.
you, Liz. It'd be great to see where we are in a year's time. It'd be great to hopefully meet you at one of our charges one day as well. That'd be a nice little addition as well.
Well, you did offer Spain at one point, didn't you? So I'll take you on Spain.
I did. You're more than welcome to come and see all of the charges in the car park in Barcelona. That'd be all right as well.
Oh, bless you. Well, listen, thank you very much, Tom. It's been lovely to talk to you. And for everybody else, I'm going to make sure that I add all of the links to kind of all of Tom's links. And just to say thank you to you all for watching and listening. The usual. Please like, subscribe, share, follow us on LinkedIn, the Electric Evolution podcast page. And yeah, thank you very much. And I'll see you next time. Thanks, Tom. And thanks you. See you later. Bye. Thanks for watching Electric Evolution with Liz Allan. If you've enjoyed this episode, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. If you're a charge point operator, local authority or stakeholder in EV charging, I'd love to talk to you about our Charge Point Evolution framework. It's designed to help you create a seamless EV driver journey, boost utilisation and maximise your return on investment. Alternatively, if you know someone who'd be a great podcast guest or might be interested in sponsoring an episode, you can email me on liz@fullcircleci.co.uk. Thanks again for watching.